Right. Good evening, everyone. You're welcome to this month's edition of our Minds and Beyond webinar. My name is Omotola Ajayi, and I'm co-founder of Minds and Beyond. It's such a pleasure to have everyone on here, and it's an honor to have our guest speaker. She's arrived several minutes before 7, which is very commendable. And we've had these webinars since we started in May. So we've had May, June, and July. So this is our third edition. And today we'll be talking about a very important topic, which is burnout. It's something that can affect anyone. And I'm sure that we are in for lots of juicy content and real life experiences and solutions, most importantly. So I'm very delighted to be here today, not just because I am one of the organizers of the program, but because I'm here with my book, I'm ready to enjoy every single bit of the conference, of the webinar. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to unlearn. I'm ready to just soak it all in and also to teach others perhaps in the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a ride. You should share this with your friends, with your family members, your loved ones, because everyone needs to hear about this topic. Everyone needs coping strategies, and that's why we're here. So, at Minds and Beyond, what we do is basically we try to destigmatize mental health conditions and also educate the public on mental health conditions and how best to manage them. And obviously, today we're talking about burnout, which is something that affects a lot of people, not just people that have mental health diagnosis, but everyday people like you and I. So it's something that is relevant to you, it's something that is relevant to me. So let's share along. I'll be handing over the baton to my co-founder, my lovely co-founder, Busola, to introduce herself and just share a few thoughts with us.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this month's episode of Minds and Beyond monthly webinar series. As almost as rightly said, we are talking about burnout today. So whether you're on the spectrum of there is just so much to do with very little time, you don't understand where is the time to rest, what is the alternative, or you're on the other spectrum of having so much goals and a lot of things to achieve. We all know that we've struggled with burnout at one point or the other. A lot of people here are healthcare professionals and starting the profession working 56 hours shift where you can't even talk. Who dares you to talk after working a weekend shift, 48-hour weekend shift, and then you have to do 8 hours on Monday before having to go home and then resume work the next day again. We all have our stories of burnout, whatever it is that is fueling it. And it's our hope that today we would come to a full circle to identify what burnout really is, what maintains burnout, how to overcome burnout, whether we're there already, or how to prevent burnout. Because the truth is that if you're able to get over it after a weekend, then you're probably not burned out. People who are really burned out, it can take as long as 2 years to recover from burnout. That's why this conversation is so important. And it's our pleasure to have our erudite guest speaker who would be taking us along. Dr. Bojibola Abiri is a consultant psychiatrist and managerial psychologist and CEO of RedMed Consulting Services. She's a fellow of the West African College of Physicians and a member of various professional organizations. She's passionate about mental health advocacy, and she's a regular voice in print and electronic media, promoting awareness and education. It's my pleasure to have Dr. Bojibola here today, and we'll hand over to her without further ado.
All right. A very good evening. I know you guys are on the evening time zone. I was about to say good afternoon to everyone on the call. I'm on the afternoon time zone. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Please confirm that you can hear me and clearly too.
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Right. So I'd like to thank you very much for the warm welcome, for inviting me to come speak about this very topical issue that is indeed apt for our times. I think it's particularly enlightening because, like you rightly said, a significant number of the people on the call at present, at least, are healthcare professionals. And so sometimes you ask yourselves, are we using our own medicine, Or do we just keep prescribing those medicines and telling everyone, oh, do this, oh, do that? And at the end of the day, we really don't do so much of those things. Of course, I'd like to welcome myself too. I mean, you're having me in the month of August. I'd like to refer to myself as the August visitor, always making a presentation in August. And the topic before me today, is one that, like you rightly said when you were introducing, both Omotola and Adebusola, it's something that can happen to just about anyone at any point in time. So today's topic is one that is titled Can't Stop, Won't Stop, Putting an End to Burnout. Burnout is a reality. Burnout is something that we've seen, we've heard people talk about. Sometimes it's difficult to, effectively articulate what people are saying when they're burnt out. Because again, it shows up in different people at different times and in different ways. And to be honest, even as professionals, sometimes even we miss out the signs because either we're overwhelmed by work or we're so, into what we're doing. And then we keep giving and giving and giving of ourselves until we hit rock bottom and we really can't, pull ourselves back. And so today, again, like I've said, I welcome everyone on the call to the conversation on Can't Stop, Won't Stop, Putting an End to Burnout. It is my hope and desire that at the end of today's conversation, yes, we can go on to the next slide. At the end of today's conversation, we'll be able to identify, things that we may have done at one point or another, and also ensure practical steps to, ensure that we can keep ourselves in a good place and not burn out. And so I almost always like to share this slide when I'm talking about a topic just around the corner of burnout. And I, of course, introduced the man in the pictures as Mr. A. Mr. A is wearing an attire that became extremely popular during the COVID-19 pandemic. Sometimes I dare say that the attire that he is wearing, not his clothes, of course, the obvious attire on his head, is one that became almost, if not more important than a visa to anywhere. And that attire, of course, is the face mask. It's just that Mr. A in this picture is not wearing the mask over his face. He's wearing it on the occipital part of his head. But Mr. A tells us that in this picture, ladies and gentlemen, this is just me trying to protect my mental health. And so this evening, I just want all of us on the call to put one thing. If you had to choose one thing that is something that it is your go-to to protect your mental health, please put it in the chat box. Let's see what is the one thing that you do that you use to protect your own mental health. I have bailed the cat. I have written one thing that I do. I know we do a lot of things, but if you had to choose one thing that you do quite regularly, that you try to ensure that your mental health is in place, good. So I put sleep. Adebusola said exercise. Rosalind said eat, easy on that. Morenike said sleep in capital letters. Well, Omotola says she runs. Well, Lovett says see a movie. Well, again, I hope you don't binge on the movies when you eventually decide to see it. Karim says minding my business. So usually we would say drink water and mind your own business. Again, Josephine Omoni reinforces, she's in our WhatsApp group. It looks like, quite a number of people are in this WhatsApp group of sleep. Aziz also says plenty sleep, spend time with family, watch Arsenal FC. Well, Aziz, we asked for one. If I had to choose one, I'll say watch Arsenal FC. Well, I don't know if watching Arsenal FC, I don't know what the seasons are like these days. I haven't been following quite, closely, but I hope that Arsenal is not breaking your heart like they almost have over the years. Right. Lovett says, call my sister. So creating meaningful connections with another. And Omotola again says sleep. So again, I feel like, the highest thing that people are talking about today is sleep. I hope that we actually sleep. Lovett says sleep does not work for me. You should come to some of us that have the anointing to sleep. It will work. We'll teach you how it works. We'll teach you what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And, you'd effectively react. But of course, again, it's important to remember that different things work for different people and at different times. And so if sleep doesn't do it for you, you may just be hanging out with people. It may be reading a book. It may be writing a book. It might be journaling. It might even be going to the sauna or to the spa. But it's important to be able to identify a couple of things. But for me, very importantly, one thing that if you had to pick out from everything that you do, that will stand out very, easily. Now let's move on to the next slide. And for people who may have heard me speak previously, you would know that I like to tell stories. But it's interesting that today's story is my own story. And it's a story that I probably have not publicly shared. So when I say publicly shared, I haven't shared it on any social media platform because I was waiting for, quote and unquote, the right time. But I've shared it at a few audiences because I felt like people would resonate with your story when you tell your story, when they can identify themselves in your story. So for instance, I am female, I am young, beautiful Black woman, psychiatrist, wife, mother, sister, friend, and so much more, of course. And so my story goes back to the 15th of February, 2022. I remember that it was the 15th of February, 2022, because it was the day after Valentine's. And on Valentine's Day, I decided not to wear a red dress. Red, by the way, is my best color. I say it's my lucky color. And so on the 15th of February, I wore this red dress and I went to work. At the time, I was working as the medical director of a top psychiatric facility, private psychiatric facility in Lagos. The job was quite demanding. In fact, in the week that I resumed that job, a few months prior, I actually wanted to resign because I felt caged. I felt like I didn't have the freedom that I wanted. So I was coming from a job that I was working twice or thrice a week. I mean, people will say that I have Gen Z behavior. I agree. I like to be flexible. I like to be able to decide what I want to do, when I want to do, and how I want to do it, which closely reminds me of the chapter in a book that I once read. The book is titled The Psychology of Money. The author is Morgan Housel. And Chapter 7 says that freedom is the greatest dividend that money can buy. Being able to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, with whom you want to do it. I was coming from a job that allowed me freedom to a job that wanted me to be there every day, 8 to 5, without fail. And unfortunately, I didn't have a junior doctor. I had requested for a junior doctor, hoping that I would get that, but it didn't happen. So within a few days, I'm like, no, this is not me. I want to resign. But I stayed on because, again, how would it look? It would look like I wasn't, competent or, consistent with so I stayed on this job and started to work. And it was a lot of work. It was work that took my physical strength. It took a lot on my emotions. I mean, as psychiatrists, we know the toll that our work can take on us, the emotional toll, especially if you are dedicated to the work that you do and you do good work. And so by February 15, 2022, I went to work on that day, long day as usual, patient appointments, family member appointments, meetings, presentations. At a point, I even had to leave the office to have a presentation in another office. I came back to work. And when I was going home at 8 o'clock at night, I suddenly realized, wow, I hadn't eaten all day. So this was me. I had been working so hard, but I hadn't had time to put anything into my mouth. So on my drive home, I told my driver at the time to stop at a grocery shop because I wanted to pick up some groceries. I picked up a few things and then I took a bottle of yogurt. When I drank this bottle of yogurt, I found, of course, as we almost always know, that circulation then diverts to the stomach. When I got to my apartment on that evening, so I used to live on the 11th and 12th floor of a 14-story building apartment. When I got home that day, for those of us who have lived in Nigeria, worked in Nigeria, we know that power situations can be quite erratic. There was power in the building, but there was no power in the elevator. And so what that meant was that I had to climb every floor to get to my apartment. I asked my driver to leave, telling him, don't worry, I'll be able to carry all the things that I had bought. So handbag in tow, laptop bag in tow, grocery bags. I started up on the stairs. Each flight was 2 floors. By the time I got to the 8th floor, I was sweating like a fish. I was confused. I knew that if I didn't stop in that moment, my body was going to stop. So I stopped, dropped everything that I had bought, and I ran, to the front of the building. When I got to the front of the building, I just, rested for a while, hoping to get, my composure back, which I eventually did, by the way. And then I went back upstairs to the apartment. When I eventually did get to the apartment and my body was it was in disarray. But eventually I lay down, and the thoughts that kept coming to my mind was that with how I was feeling, I felt that my PCV, my pack cell volume, my blood level was not up to 24. I mean, I had not had to check it in years, but with how I was feeling at that point in time, I thought it would be nice to go to a lab the next day. So the next day, I went to a lab, and the instruction I always give when I get to a lab is, please look for the person who will get my vein once, because my veins can be quite tiny, difficult to get. And of course, we know that the process is painful. Eventually, when they did prick me and get my blood and did a full blood count, my PCV was not 24. It was worse than that. It was 22. And so for me, that was a very, very rude awakening at that point in time, largely because I could have died. I could have died, and if they had gone ahead to do an autopsy, it would have been extremely shocking to find out that, oh, it was probably, due to anemia and anemic heart failure. And everybody would probably look at me and say, that doctor, oh, she was so careless. But anyways, a few months before that time, it might interest you to know that I had put in my resignation from that job, because the mental toll of the burnout had started before the physical toll started to show up. But because of the position that I held, I had to give a 3-month notice that, okay, I'm MD, I'll need to hand over, I'll need to do a few things. So by February, it was in the middle of the month when I was going to leave the job. By the end of that month, I left that job. And to be honest, I have never looked back. I've never looked back because I've gone on to do many other things. Again, so right now I don't have a full-time job. That may not work for everyone on the call, which is why we're having this conversation today, so that everyone can see where our stories meet, where they can say, oh, this may have been me. Oh, that could have been me. Oh, this is me right now. And you can also understand how best to manage your health and your well-being. Now, let's move on very quickly. Before the conversation on burnout, I want to say that this is us. This is all of us. At some point or another, we're juggling so many balls. We're trying to be son, brother, sister, uncle, auntie, father, mother. We're trying to be lecturer. We're trying to be professional. We're trying to be, church goers. We're trying to be people who go to the mosque. We're trying to give, a lot to the clubs we belong to, whether they be football clubs or social clubs. At every point in time, we're either trying to meet or beat deadlines. We're trying to, get through this hustle and bustle of what life really is. And so we keep struggling. We keep working hours. We don't rest. When we're resting, we're telling ourselves, oh, should you be resting? There's so much work that you have to do. We keep looking at the demands of work. We can't seem to stop. Again, can't stop, won't stop. And then we keep, many times feeling guilty about not being able to give the best to our jobs, not being able to give the best to our spouses, not being able to give the best to our children, not even being able to, show up for our friends or social gigs, social commitments like we always used to. And then, of course, all of these things add up. And so whether it is that you're waking up to God knows how many emails a day, or you have to write a couple of letters every day, or you have to see a number of patients every day, it is important that you recognize who you are or where you are in this jigsaw puzzle of what life is. Because again, I remind all of us that this is us. Now let's move on. And to talk about burnout, I would like to start, talking about what the myths of burnout is. I have about 5 myths, and quite a number of people believe that burnout is just being tired. But well, as someone who has burnt out, I'll tell you that burnout is more than exhaustion. Burnout is emotional, it is mental, and it is spiritual depletion. The second myth says that burnout happens only to people in high-powered or corporate jobs. That's not true. Burnout is not about the title. It's about chronic stress without recovering. It's about feeling trapped or unsupported. I've seen doctors burn out. I've seen engineers burn out, but I've also seen stay-at-home moms, stay-at-home dads burn out. Burnout does not discriminate. It is about pressure, not prestige. Now, myth 3, let's move on, tells us that burnout is not a well, it says that burnout is a character flaw. However, we must know that it's not a character flaw. Burnout is often the result of carrying too much for too long without enough support. Burnout is not a sign of weakness. It is often a sign that you've been too strong for too long without rest. Myth 4 says to us that if you love what you do, if you're passionate, you will not burn out. But the truth is, passion does not prevent burnout. In fact, passion can hide burnout. The more emotionally invested you are in what you do, the more vulnerable you're likely to be. And so we must know that whether you're a teacher, a business person, a doctor, an artist, an activist, burnout can happen because we genuinely care about the work that we do. The love for your job is not going to refuel your tank. It just makes it easier to ignore the warning lights that something is not going on quite right. And the last myth I want us to share today is that burnout goes away on its own if you push through. Is it just a little bit more? Just push a little bit more. Well, pushing through usually makes burnout worse. What is needed when you actually burn out is recovery, reflection, and sometimes, many times, real life changes, either in your workload, in your mindset, or in the support that you get from people around you. We must be able to identify that burnout is like having a leak in a boat. It may seem like a small leak, but imagine being at sea and you're with friends, or even if you're alone on that boat and there is a hole. No matter how seemingly small that hole is, after a while, water will fill up, that boat. And so you can't just keep pouring out the water. What you need to do is that you're going to eventually learn how to fix the hole. Now let's move on and talk about, so what really is burnout? And I thought that it was interesting to have this matchsticks depict, well, burn a little, have light, shine your candle, shine your light. But after a while, what happens is the more you leave that light on, the more you keep pursuing the goals, the more you keep pushing and not resting, the more you keep going on without turning the lights out, turning the lights down low. Eventually, you would find that you will burn out like this last stick and, of course, eventually break. Many times, some people don't even need to get to this point before they break out, and it shows up in different ways in our life. So what is burnout? Burnout, according to the World Health Organization, is more than just feeling trapped, tired, or stressed. Burnout is actually recognized as an occupational health hazard, an occupational phenomenon, something that happens when chronic stress at work isn't successfully managed. So I would usually say, like we probably all know, that stress is a normal part of our lives. It's a normal response. What is, however, detrimental, debilitating, and distressing to us as individuals is chronic stress. And that's what happens when we burn out. We've been exposed to chronic stress that we are unable to successfully manage. And so the WHO defines it in 3 major parts, which is what I have on the screen today. And so let me walk you through each, giving you, real life examples along the way. The first one is emotional exhaustion. When you're emotionally exhausted, you just feel drained. It feels as if your tank is empty. It's not just physical tiredness, it's emotional and mental depletion. And so how does it show up in individuals? In a mother, it may show up as a mother who wakes up feeling exhausted in spite of sleeping long hours. And she feels like she has nothing left to give, even to herself and even to her own children. For a health worker, it's an individual who gets through their shift in autopilot. You don't even remember how you woke up, what you did, whether you ate, how you drove to work, how many traffic lights you went by. You just showed up and did everything in autopilot. And then you eventually go home, you lie on the couch for hours, unable to speak or even feel anything. For a student, it might be someone who used to be extremely enthusiastic about their work, but now they're finding it extremely difficult to even open their laptop. They feel numb and overwhelmed. And so when we find ourselves in this state of emotional exhaustion, more often than not, what we find is we start to say things like, I don't even know what I can't feel anything anymore. I'm not even enjoying anything anymore. In fact, I don't care anymore. The next step, of course, is what is known as the depersonalization or the cynicism. And this has to do with when you start to feel disconnected from your work, the people around you, or even from yourself. You may become cynical or emotionally distant. What used to give you joy, what used to give you happiness, just suddenly looks like, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't even want to go there. And so sometimes, how does it show up? For someone like a health worker who was extremely passionate about helping people, showing up to work and all of that, you avoid going to work. You'd look for the best excuses. You avoid eye contact with your patients. You avoid asking them the usual questions that you would usually, ask. For some other people who work as members of a team, you may find that you don't even care about your team members anymore. Now you're thinking, why am I even bothering? Does anyone even care? Does anyone even see the work that I do? And for other people, what we find is that if you used to enjoy coming to work, you bring in your best self to work, all of a sudden you find that you're extremely irritated, you're cranky, you're snappy, or you just feel like you're just going through the motions. And so this can be described as building a wall between yourself and the world. You're not trying to be mean to anyone. What you're honestly just trying to do is to survive the moment. You're trying to survive the day. Let me just get through this day and get on to the next day. The third phase, of course, is what is known as the reduced personal accomplishment. And this is when you feel like you are not achieving anything. Even if you are, you minimize just about everything. Oh, you did amazing work. That's a coworker telling you, oh, you did amazing. Oh, really? Oh, that's what I do every day. I don't really think I didn't even put in much effort to do it. You lose confidence. Your self-perception starts to become low. You don't feel as motivated as you used to, and you don't even have a sense of meaning anymore. And so sometimes you may see that even when you do the best, even when you put a lot of effort, you feel like no matter what you do, it's never enough. Someone who works long hours may feel like a failure, convinced that they're falling behind. You keep comparing yourself to everyone. Oh, this person showed up today. This person did this today. Why can't I be like this person? And then, of course, you find out that if you are someone who is creative, after a while, you're not proud of the work that you're doing anymore. You keep constantly comparing yourself to others because you think that other people have it better than you. You feel like the work that you do is meaningless or is not good enough. You might even hear yourself tell yourself like things like, what's the point? I used to be good at this. Now I feel so useless. And so to tie it all together about burnout, according to the WHO, burnout is not just about being worked out. Being overworked, rather, it's about being overwhelmed and under supported for so long, such that you finally lose energy, you lose meaningful connection, and you lose meaning in your own life. Burnout happens slowly, often silently. We may not be able to tell what the signs are. And the honest truth is that burnout can affect just about anyone. Now let's move on and see what common burnout symptoms we have. And so we see this individual with their head on the laptop, with their battery almost at empty. There's something I usually say that many times, many of us pick up our phones. If we randomly picked up our phones and I ask you, what percentage is your phone on? What percentage is your phone on? More often than not, we're likely to get, oh, it's on 70, or it's on 100, or it's on 50. But we often let our batteries go out, our own body batteries go out, but we don't let the same thing happen to our phones. We find that we treat our cars, our phones better than sometimes we treat ourselves. And so we get drained. And so when we're drained, when we're burnt out, we find that our sleep suffers. Of course, when sleep suffers, other biological functions also suffer. Appetite suffers, appetite for food, appetite for sex suffers, and our mood, of course, starts to suffer. We also find that we feel a lot of fatigue, even without doing anything, even after seemingly having a good night's rest, we're just tired. We have problems paying attention and concentrating. We may find that we also have frequent recurrent illnesses, which might indicate a low functioning immune system. And so today you're at the hospital, you complain to the doctor, oh, I have this, I have a cough, I have a cold, I have a sore throat. They run all the tests, and what do they find? Nothing. Sometimes it's, recurrent malaria. If you live in a place like Nigeria, you just have these symptoms and you just keep feeling like, oh, it's malaria, oh, it's malaria. But the honest truth is that your immune system has become so depleted and it's struggling to help you. Of course, we must know that, there can also be physical and mental health implications. So there's an increased tendency to physical health conditions such as blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, and even respiratory conditions like asthma. People who are burnt out are more at risk of depression because, again, when you start looking at yourself and you start feeling low, you don't feel energized, you don't appreciate the work that you're doing, you have a negative perception of yourself, a negative perception of the world, and a negative perception of the future. There's likely to be loss of interest or pleasure in previously enjoyed activities. And so for Aziz, who says he watches Arsenal FC, Aziz will just find out that, oh no, I'm not enjoying football anymore. I don't even feel like putting up my TV. Even when there's a championship, whatever it is that you start to enjoy, you find that you're not that interested in it anymore. The last is that individuals who are, burnt out may also have suicidal ideation, especially when they feel like they're not appreciated, when they feel like, oh, perhaps the work that I'm doing is not adding up. Nobody sees it. Nobody appreciates it. They just say the things that they're saying to help me feel better. Not necessarily so, but these are some of the common burnout symptoms that we find time to time in individuals. Now let's go on and see why we don't see it coming. And so when I was preparing the slides and I saw this thing and I said, why we don't see it coming? Of course, the first thing that came to my mind was Ashake's song that says, they never see me coming. That's what burnout does to us. Burnout creeps in. Burnout is akin to hypertension. Very often we talk about hypertension and we say hypertension is the silent killer. You don't know it's there, but it's there and it's doing its work. And so many times, a lot of us at the brink of burnout, or we're actually already burnt out, but we don't see it coming. And that's largely because there's a culture of can't stop, won't stop. There's a culture that over time has allowed us to continue to, push ourselves. And so the three things I wrote on this slide, I said there's the hustle culture, there's the silent burnout, and there's functional depression. Now, what is the hustle culture? We almost always feel like we have to be seen to be busy before we can be validated by everyone. When we're not doing anything, when people don't see us, it means that we're not productive. Not necessarily so. We've inherited a work ethic where rest equals weakness. I know that some people, when they're talking about things like sleep, they say, oh, sleep is for the weak. Not necessarily so. For all the people in my WhatsApp group who love sleep, sleep is not for the weak. Sleep is for the human. And so it's important that we identify that we continue to glorify the fact that it is only when people can see the hard work, the big work. I have to walk like an elephant before we're actually seen to be doing something. And so even mental health professionals are at risk because we keep pushing ourselves. We keep pushing ourselves and making others feel like we need to be seen to be hustling. I remember there's something they say, hustle hard, hustle low, hustle. The hustle culture is something that quite a number of us do. Then the other thing, of course, is what is called the silent burnout. People who smile through it, they keep going and then they crash. And I'd like to, tie that silent burnout to functional depression, which is also known as smiling depression, which is also known as max depression. And even though we don't seem to have a diagnostic criteria for that just yet, a lot of people are pushing, for it. I used to have a patient a few years ago who I was managing for depression. But you see, one thing about her was that to me, the therapist, I knew she was depressed, but to the world, she was showing up. And so she would lie in bed for days, unable to get out of bed, but she was overeating. She would order for chocolates, ice cream. She would order for cakes, but she won't get up from the bed. She won't take a bath. She won't brush her teeth. But she was eating all of those things and indulging and drinking alcohol. And then whenever she had a presentation like I have today, she would pull herself up from bed and then wash her face, put on some light makeup, and ta-da, the lights come on and she's smiling, looking so beautiful. And the people on the other end are like, oh, how do you do it? She just kept showing up and people kept thinking, oh, wow, she must have a secret formula. But what they did not realize, and it's one thing that we also need to understand, that just because people keep showing up does not mean that they have the best quality of life. Just because people keep showing up does not necessarily mean that they're enjoying themselves or that they're actually being productive. Some people just keep showing up because that's what the society wants. That's how the society appears to appreciate you or value what you're bringing to the table or actually even validates you. And so let's move on as I talk about the fact that what is burnout in real life, the everyday faces. And I wanted this to be as, comical as possible. the faces that we can make from all of this, this objects that I put here. We must know that burnout does not wear a uniform. It's like burnout also reminds me of what we used to say when HIV came to town. What did we used to say? We used to say that, they show for face. And so burnout, like, HIV, like many mental health conditions, it doesn't show on the face. Sometimes some people are going through the toughest moments of their lives, but they keep showing up. They keep showing up because it's what they always do. They keep showing up because it is what our expectations of them are. They keep showing up because, well, they need to pick up a salary at the end of the month anyway and continue to, take care of their families. They keep showing up because if they don't do it, who will? Who will take care of everyone else? But the individual who burns out keeps taking care of everyone else at the expense of their own selves. And so we must know that burnout doesn't wear a uniform. It doesn't usually announce itself with flashing lights. It quietly wears people down. And those people can be parents, they can be workers, they can be carers, and even young people. And so when it shows up, like I said earlier on, the individual may be a single mom with children who is emotionally unavailable, emotionally exhausted, with loss of joy and identity, with self-neglect due to care overload. It may be a young healthcare worker who is depersonalized with emotional numbness, withdrawal, who is cynical, who has lost empathy and energy, and is not even able to, help a patient anymore like they usually would. It could be a university student who is mentally exhausted, who has lost meaning and motivation, who aims for perfection but continues to fall short. It can be any of us. And so we must know that burnout may show up with different faces, with different stories, but the same silent burnout. And so I say to you today, if you see yourself in any of these stories or in someone that you care about, you must know that it is not weakness. It is a signal, and signals are meant to be noticed, not neglected. Let's move on. As I say to us today, what burnout is trying to tell us. Burnout is a message, not a weakness. Burnout does not mean that you're not doing your best. Burnout does not mean that you don't have the skills and the talents and the abilities. Burnout is your mind and your body calling for help. It's actually screaming and telling you that, please give me some attention right now. And so you must normalize the response that you are not broken. You are burning and you need to put that fire out. And so how can you put this fire out? Next slide, please. I've decided today that what actually works. How can we put an end to burnout? You can see the young lady who is, seated here, basking in the sun, having her skin being kissed by the sun. So there's no work in front of her. There's no one else in front of her. And so I say to us today that we must recognize, we must reclaim, and we must restore. How do we recognize? Recognition for me, first of all, has to do with realizing that burnout is not just being tired. You need to be self-aware enough to be able to spot the early signs. You need to ask yourself questions. When last did I feel joy? Because burnout will show up as irritability, numbness, poor concentration, exhaustion, and many people push through it. They keep thinking, oh, this is just life. This is what life is supposed to be. But you also need to pay attention to the things that energize you and to the things that make you feel, drained. The second thing I say to you is that you must be able to reclaim yourself. You need to be able to take back what burnout stole, because burnout steals from you. And so how can you ensure this? You need to ensure certain self-care practices. Take care of yourself. Self-care is not selfish. Sometimes the only selfless thing you can do for yourself is to be selfish. Take care of yourself. Pay attention to yourself. Learn to say no without guilt. Schedule joy. Be intentional about having joy in your life. The same way you say yes to work, say yes to joy, and reclaim rest. I usually say something that we all need vitamin R. Vitamin R, when I say vitamin R, people are like, where can I buy it? No, vitamin R is not another drug. Vitamin R is rest. It is rest. It is, rest, and more rest. Rest that will get you refueled, rest that will get you rejuvenated and revitalized as well. And so you must think of one activity that makes you feel alive. What would it take to reclaim that activity? Even if it is for just 10 minutes, either every day or every week. And the last thing that I want you to know is that you must learn how to restore yourself. You are not a machine. You are a living system. And even machines, we turn them off. You need support systems to restore yourself. And so what actually restores us? Connection. So I'm happy that when I asked earlier on what some of us, do, connection, talk to someone who listens to you, a friend, a therapist, a support group. You must practice mindfulness, be present in the moment, let go of things that destroy your mind, that distress you. Even if it is 5 minutes of silence, of breathing, pay attention to yourself. You must, of course, indulge in physical care, sleep and movement. Please sleep. Sleep, again, is not for the weak. Sleep is for the human. You must move, exercise, but also nourish yourself. Eat to feed your body, not to fuel your emotions. Spend time outside, just like this woman here. Take a walk in the park and sometimes unplug from technology. Turn off your phone. The world will not stop, but your body can stop. And of course, if you feel overwhelmed, please reach out for professional help. Normalize getting help. Normalize speaking to someone. You wouldn't expect your phone to run on 1% battery, just like I said earlier on. Why then do you expect that of yourself? As I start to close, let's move on to the next slide. I want us to pay attention to the lessons that I learned on my own burnout journey. Because again, I think it's more powerful when we listen to the fact that someone somewhere has gone through something and, they're just reaching out to us. We can learn a lot from their stories. What did I learn? I learned that burnout doesn't ask for permission. Burnout is quiet and gradual. I also learned, like in the book by Bessel van der Kolk, that burnout ensures that the body keeps the score. Yoruba, people who speak Yoruba will tell you that araloman fabosi. You keep taking it and say, oh, no, I'm not tired. Just one more patient. Just one more, just one more for the road. But what you don't realize is that your body is actually keeping the score. And one day, your body will break down. Number 3, I learned that self-neglect can look like commitment. You keep thinking that you're helping everyone else. You keep giving to everyone else, but you keep depleting of yourself. Remember that, you cannot serve from an empty vessel. And I remember, this makes me remember one movie many years ago. It wasn't a movie, it was a series. The series by House, Dr. House. Dr. House said something very important that I keep remembering every time. Nobody wants to see a sick doctor. If you are sick, people will go somewhere else. If you drop dead today, there are many other people. So please pay attention to yourself. You must know that helping others is not a substitute for helping yourself. You need to pay attention to yourself. Boundaries aren't selfish. Boundaries are a form of survival. Learn how to say no without shalaye. We call it shalaye FC. Learn how to say no and be firm about it. Learn how to say no without feeling guilty. You must remember that you can recover, but recovery is not automatic. You need to give something up to recover. And I say here that we must also ensure mental hygiene. Mental hygiene has to do with daily steps that we take to ensure that our minds and our bodies, just like we brush our teeth every day, well, I would assume that we do, or we take our baths every day, I would also assume that we do. It's important to engage in activities that our minds and our bodies will thank us for. Please, let's stop abusing our bodies. Let's stop thinking that I'm young, I'll make up for it later. You must always do something every day that your future self will thank you for. In closing, next slide, please. I started with my story. And so I also want to close with my story. I said it when I started that I had not gone public with this story before. I've shared it at a few forums. If you see the picture on the left where I was wearing the beautiful color red, that was my hair many years ago. But the 2 pictures following it were the pictures of my hair that I took 1 month after I found out that my PCV was 22%. Not only was my PCV low, my hair also started to fall off. And so you can only imagine what I started to think. Am I sick? And I don't know. In fact, at that time in my life, I wasn't used to wearing wigs. So when my hair fell out, I couldn't go out for a week. I felt sad. I was very worried. I felt quite ashamed that, wow, what happened to my hair? In fact, I contemplated cutting it, no, this can't be me. Are you telling me that I was taking care of everyone else and neglecting myself? Well, again, clearly, that's what happened. But, the picture right next to the hair loss was me about 2 weeks ago at the salon trying to fix my hair. I have paid attention to myself. I have used my own medicine. And that medicine, of course, is all of the things that I have encouraged us to do today as we start to think about how we can recognize, how we can reclaim the 3 R's, and how we can restore not just our bodies and our minds. The last picture, of course, is a very recent picture of mine where I believe that I look as well as I once did. I think that one thing I must also say about burnout before I, get off the stage is that it takes a long time for your body to heal. And so while you might think that, oh, it's just a little damage, that quote and unquote little damage may take you 2 years, it may take you 3 years, it may take you 4 years. And in some people, they may never be able to recover. So please remember that self-care is not selfish, and that sometimes the most selfless thing that you can do for yourself is to pay attention to yourself. In closing, I just want to say that what burnout taught me is that burnout taught me to pay attention. It taught me to pay attention to myself. Burnout taught me to pay attention to myself. Burnout taught me, last slide, please. Burnout taught me to pay attention to myself. Burnout taught me to pay attention to the people around me. It taught me to pay attention to all the things that were stressing me, and I did not realize that they were stressors. It helped me to pay attention to the spaces between the work. And now, when I work with others who feel like they are running on empty, I don't speak just as a psychiatrist. I speak as someone who has been informed, aware, and who has also been there, and who, by the grace of God, found their way back. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and your attention. And I'm hopeful that you would have taken one thing away from today's lesson. I don't know what it is. You probably want to share what it is that you've taken away, but please take care of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bonjibola. That was simply amazing. The energy, the vulnerability, the clarity, the message, everything was so on point. Thank you so much. I definitely gained a lot. I wish I could share my notes. I've taken lots and lots of notes. Thank you so much. That was super impactful. And we know that it wasn't just from a place of being a psychiatrist, like you said. It was definitely from a lived experience that you have had yourself, and you've been able to overcome with evidence. There's evidence of everything that has happened. So thank you so much. So we'll just want to take a few questions so that at least we can have some audience engage. Does anyone have any questions, please? Okay, I have a question just before we round up. Yes. First of all, I want to say that we have a feedback form in the chat box. We'll be very happy if people could fill the feedback form. Okay, Dr. Ikumezie has a question. Chidi, yes, you can speak and you can show your face as well.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the topic. I would say somehow I quite relate a whole lot to most of the things that are said. Unfortunately, I can't share my face. I can't show my face because I'm driving and I I can only just speak. My question is this: burnout, depression. Is there a difference, or is there a difference? That's basically what I want to know. Or again, burnout and then having anxiety problem or illness, is there a difference?
All right. Should we take all the questions at once? I'm just assuming. So we have another
Yes.
question from
Yes, yes. Dr. Tuata.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Abi, for the talk. I also cannot share my face at the moment. Um, so my question is, what do we do as a, would I say, junior worker, for instance? if I'm experiencing burnout. So, for instance, as a senior doctor, if I'm experiencing burnout, I can take time off, you know. But if I'm a house officer, a junior resident, and I'm in a situation where I'm burnt out, and the culture, actually expects you to toughen up, what do I do in that situation as a junior doctor?
Are there any other questions so that we can take just one more question? And while we listen to the answer, please let's fill the feedback form as well. I think those two questions are apt. We can.
Right. Right. So thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. I'll start with the first question. While depression and burnout may appear very similar, they are different. They often overlap. It's very important that we're aware that they're not the same thing, because people may just generally assume that, oh, I'm tired, when they're actually depressed, or they may think that I'm tired when they're actually burnt out. However, a simple way to tell the difference between burnout and depression is that let's look at what the cause is. In burnout almost always happens because there's chronic work-related stress. Depression, on the other hand, can happen even without a clear external cause. In burnout, the focus is largely work role specific. In depression, the focus is that it affects all aspects of life. In burnout, people's emotions, often get exhausted, frustrated, or cynical. In depression, you have hopelessness, worthlessness, helplessness, emptiness, guilt feelings. With burnout, you have an energy drain at work. You might feel better when you're away from work, but in depression, regardless of where you are, the energy is constantly low, even during enjoyable activities. And then sometimes, of course, recovery for burnout is that you take time off, you rest, you put boundaries in place, and sometimes you just do some adjustments to your workplace schedules. On the other hand, with depression may need clinical treatment. Of course, you may need, the specialized care of psychotherapy, but more often than not, depending on the severity of depression, you may actually need medication as well. So we must know that burnout can lead to depression if it is ignored. And so if an individual is unsure whether this is burnout or depression, which is a clinical diagnosis, it's not a failure. It's just a sign to reach out for help. Again, by ourselves, we may not we may not be able to specifically say that, oh, this is what's wrong. And it's the reason why you may need to reach out to a professional who is more aware, who is likely, more able to step aside from you. You as an individual may find it very difficult to tell what exactly it is. And, it's important that we get help, because the sooner we intervene, the easier the path to recovery is for all of us. So again, depression or burnout, it's okay to ask for help. Now, the second question as to what we should do as junior doctors, and, being a junior doctor who trained in a country like Nigeria, I have to roll my eyes when I said that. I'll give you an instance where there was the day I came to work and I just had a baby. I was in the early months of, having the baby. I was breastfeeding. Unfortunately, on that day, I was stooling, and I was unwell. I'd come back from maternity leave, but I was unwell. And I remember going to meet my consultant on that day to say that, sir, I'm not feeling well. Please, can I go home? Which is something I had never done in my entire, time of working. It wasn't in my character to evade work. I always gave my best to my work. And he said, no. He said, go and collect a medical report. I was in shock. I'm like, hey, seriously? But you see, as a junior doctor, and I know that you're asking this question because you're saying it from a place of responsibility. The pressure to be resilient can become toxic. And so whether you're a junior worker, whether you're in healthcare, you're in academia, or any other demanding field, you can start feeling like, am I in between my mental health or my career? I also want you to cast your mind back and think of the fact that over the past few years, we've lost a significant amount of doctors. And if you think about what happened to them, they just kept pushing on. thinking that, just a little more, just a little more. Some of them slumped at work, some of them, slumped in theaters, but eventually they died. And so how can we, help ourselves? One of the hardest things is that beyond exhaustion is the feeling that you are not allowed to be exhausted. And so quite a number of people feel like I don't even have permission to show my weakness, which is something here, especially if you're new in the field or you're really, really, low in cadre. And of course, the message from the top to the bottom is we've been through it before. Yusuf, do it. This weekend, I had a reunion with schoolmates from 20 years ago. And one thing I kept saying was, as a medical student, I never felt supported. As a medical student, nobody really cared. And so in my own life now as a consultant psychiatrist and as a lecturer, I don't do that to my students. I extend grace to them. And that grace is pretty much, one midnight. And I'm telling you this story because, again, we need to also start becoming the kind of people that we want to see. We need to start, engineering the change because, again, we can, just keep saying it, but the change needs to start with us. And so I remember one midnight, a student called me, and the student was a 200 level student who was calling on behalf of a 500 level student who had overdosed on medication. That patient, that student was a known sickle cell patient. That student he had lost his mother and he was blaming his mother for the death. He was struggling. And so I had to ask them, take him to the emergency, do this. But I also had to ask him, how would you like that I support you? And he told me that, because of his ill health, he had been missing class. He hadn't been able to show up. And so what did I do? I just called up my professor and I said, there's someone who I want to come and meet you. So for me to be able to call my professor, it's clearly because, Professor Atilola is cut from the same cloth. He's also kind enough to listen to the challenge. And so, unfortunately, it's one of the things I said. It's the culture that we've continued to perpetuate. It's the hustle culture, the silent, burnout culture, the culture of functional depression and really not caring. And so what can you do as a junior worker? Talk about it. Talk about it. Don't be afraid. What's the worst that can happen? They will give you extension. I know that sometimes that can be, it can be extremely negative. But again, give your best to your work. Let people understand that the kind of person you are is not one that evades work. Number two, find safe people. Even if your direct superior doesn't feel like a safe person, look for peers, look for mentors, look for mental health, advocates. Talk to them. Every culture will have quiet rebels, people who have been through it and who want to change from the inside out. And then, of course, you need to start setting micro boundaries. Sometimes you may not be able to change the shift rota, but you can take a break from your shift. You can stop apologizing for being sick. And of course, sometimes if you can delay certain things at work, you can delay it. If you decide that, I don't want to come for a journal club because I want to rest and I want to take on please do what you need to keep yourself alive. Because if anything happens to you, life will definitely go on. In places where things work, it's important that you document everything. Document things, especially in healthcare or in high pressure jobs. Keep records of unsafe conditions, of excessive hours, of lack of support. If things escalate, you have a foundation to speak up. And then, of course, know when to escalate. If a culture is harming your health and there's no room for advocacy or change, you may need to take yourself out. Like I took myself out at that job. I didn't have any other job. Many people kept telling me, it's because you have another job. It's because, no, I didn't have another job. In fact, when somebody asked me, I said, I'm going home. I'm going to play with my children. I'm going to start doing the things that I genuinely enjoy doing, like playing Anti-Ramo from time to time. And so, to be honest, sometimes you may need to take a walk because burnout doesn't build character. Burnout breaks people. And the more of us who speak up, even quietly, even as juniors, the more that culture starts to shift. I'm not saying it is easy, but it is important that we lend our voices and most importantly, we be the change that we want the world to see. Thank you.
You're muted.
Amazing session today. I'm sure we all agree that today's webinar was really explosive. I can see people already requesting for the replay. If you registered for the webinar on Eventbrite, you're going to get a replay. If you did not register, you may want to drop your email address in the chat so that you can get access to the replay. But for everyone who registered, you'll get access to the replay. Thank you, Dr. Bonjibola, for being here, for taking your time to really give us an awesome and robust experience. This was not just theory, you shared from your experience as a professional and your own lived experience. It was really, really powerful. And I know that we are all walking away with something. Like we said earlier on, a lot of people here are medical doctors, and Dr. Tiwatayo's question was very relevant, and I hope that we have tools that we can take away with us to begin to change things and challenge the hustle culture in our various workplaces, even in societal pressures, because it's not just at work, it's also some of the expectation that we put on ourselves from what is going on in the society or what people expect from us at one phase of our life or the other. So it was really great. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you everybody for joining today's webinar. We hope you've learned something. We hope you're taking away something. If you're yet to complete the feedback form, it takes literally 1 minute to complete. There are just about 4 questions on the feedback form. Do help us to complete the feedback form. We hope you will join us again next month on the 4th of September, when we'll be having another webinar with another great topic and an exclusive guest. So if you're on our email list, you'll definitely get to know what we'll be talking about next month. Thank you everybody for joining. We hope you have an amazing rest. Sleep, sleep, sleep. If that's the only thing you're taking away from today, do have an amazing rest. Thank you, everybody.
All right, then. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.